Chapter 10. Consumed with guilt, Jose cried so hard he pulled over once he was out of sight of their house. He was tempted to turn his truck around and go home. However, after a few minutes he composed himself and recommitted to his decision to follow through with his agreement. He never considered his own safety, but his heart broke thinking about what his family would endure. In an attempt to lessen his guilty conscience, he reminded himself he was doing this for their sake. More than anything, he wanted his children to learn the values of his father. The further south he went, the more he noticed how everything had changed. The lush fields, which had offered him resting and hiding places 10 years ago, were now mostly barren. The roadside now littered with discarded clothing, soda, and water bottles. Periodically, he saw small groups of people attempting to stay out of sight as they edged their way north. The small villages and towns he passed through now looked half deserted. Buildings were now in varying states of ruin, and many missed portions or entire roofs. There were no bright colors visible. Fences along the road lay on the ground, and what few cattle remained roamed free. Most striking were the people. He had always taken pride in the cheerfulness and hospitality of his countrymen. Now they ran at the first sight of his truck. Even the inn he stayed at the first night, the people were aloof and guarded. Finally he arrived at Zamudio La Vera, the town of his birth. Marco's family still lived there. The town was in even worse condition than those he saw earlier. His heart sank as he turned onto Marco's street. It resembled a war zone. As expected, the trip took less than 3 days, but he felt he had traveled many years into the past. Although they had not seen one another in years, Marco recognized him immediately. Even before he spoke, Jose noticed the sorrow on his face. "Come in, Jose. It is with mixed feelings I welcome you. I didn't have a chance to write you, but Father died last week. He asked for you up until the day he died." Marco had tears in his eyes as he told him, "I am so sorry. He was like my father, too. What happened to him? Your last letter said he was doing fine." "He had been sick for a long time with a bad heart. He didn't want you to know or worry." "Is that what really happened?" Jose asked, sensing Marco was not telling all. "No, not completely. It had been years since the cartel bothered us. But for some unknown reason, they started harassing my father again about you a couple of weeks before he died. It was almost like they expected you were coming." Jose thought, that was strange. No one knew I was coming back until 3 weeks ago when I was arrested. He worried constantly about Rosa and the kids, but he reassured himself Don and Sharon would be there for them. Still, he became anxious, thinking someone at home might have contacts with the cartel here. When he offered to do repairs around the town, Marco told him no. That would anger the cartel. They wanted to keep the people dependent on them, which meant permitting everything to deteriorate unless they approved the work. At last, Marco finally agreed to let him do work the cartel wouldn't see. Jose wrote Rosa a letter the night he arrived. But because the nearest post office was in the next town, it took a few weeks for him to mail it. He had to stay indoors during the day because gang members patrolled the streets. He hid his truck in a shed behind Marco's tailor shop and never came outside in daylight. He wanted to visit his family's old house, but Marco vehemently urged him not to take the risk. However, after several days, he disregarded Marco's advice. His need to experience the scene had overcome any safety considerations. Since the wretched 3-day ordeal, he had repressed most of the details, but when he entered the shell of a house, those memories flooded back. He saw the entry to the food storage area beneath the house where he had hidden. In spite of his apprehensions, he descended the shattered stairs into the past. Peering between the gaps of the floorboards, he now viewed through the eyes of a terrified 15-year-old boy.